tell you, you can tell how we got all these signatures because this is the first press conference I've had where everybody stuck to their time. With that, we're open for questions. The only thing I'd ask you to help me manage it is to figure out who you want your question directed to.
Jennifer, I'm not sure, but I'm pretty sure when you were Secretary of State, you ended up in the end rejecting some petitions that had more signatures on them than these. Can you give me an idea of what you've done to find out what the validity rate is on these signatures?
Well, we know that there's always a quality control process that goes forward, and we had the petitions coming into several different locations exercising that same quality control process. But we also know historically, if you look at the 2 times that we circulated for the initial 1,000 signatures, our validity rate was over 80%, and those were done by volunteers. So we believe that there'll be sort of a hybrid. Generally, when the traditional paid circulators circulate, we don't get as high of a validity rate, but when we have, for instance, community organizers where it's a lot of volunteers, and we have just straight volunteer organizations doing that, we do expect that validity rate to be much higher than what it was for the others. So I can't give you a specific arithmetic formula for what it's going to be, but with the fact that we need 231,000 signatures and we're this far over, there is a potential that we wouldn't need the extra signatures, but as an insurance policy, we're going forward and getting those signatures because this is very, very important. It's really sort of the underpinnings of so many other things that we do in the state to be a democratic form of government.
And if you were, as the new law would provide, if you were forbidden from continuing to collect signatures during the interim period, how much more difficult would it be for you to follow?
Well, it would be more difficult for anyone because what probably people don't realize is that 10-day period, when I was in the Secretary of State's office, we simply sent an email to the committee and said, hey, you fell short, you've got 10 more days. But this law says that that's not good enough, that it has to be by certified mail. So basically, even if signatures were collected before the time when notice was actually received physically by certified mail, and that's really taking us back to the dark ages, then they wouldn't count toward that supplement, and that just seems very mean-spirited.
Secretary Bruder, give us a few, 2 or 3 specifics here, what the major problem was with this bill. And secondly, let me ask you, did you ever at any time have any conversation with your successor, Secretary Husted, about your concerns?
Let me give you just a little background. This bill really had its genesis right after the 2008 election. And when I was still in office, we convened 2 bipartisan summits, and we invited anyone from a nonprofit expert from New York to a poll worker in Ohio, or even a voter or a candidate, an election official. And we said, what did we do right in 2008 and what needs to be better? And we saw what law changes needed to occur. So once we had those 2 summits, we had sets of recommendations. Then we brought together a bipartisan group of election officials, and they literally looked at the sections of the law that needed to be changed, including removing things that were already found unconstitutional by federal courts as far back as 2005 or 2006. So that, unfortunately, did not make it through the legislature at the end of 2010. So they started with that as sort of the guts of the bill, but then there were things that were added to it that really took it in a far different direction with a lot less, I think Tracy can attest to this, a lot less bipartisanship. So if you want to know, I mean, overall, when you start looking at one small thing after another, you've got the fact that a voter is going to walk into their polling location, and it's likely that there will be consolidated polling locations. In fact, the bill says that in a city only, that there has to be a minimum number of voters in a precinct. It doesn't also ascribe that requirement to a rural area. And then you're going to have just finished redistricting and reapportionment. So, oftentimes a voter knows whether they have the right ballot or not based on who's on their ballot, but there are going to be new names on their ballots because of the lines being different. So if they're in a multi-precinct polling location, they're going to ask a poll worker, am I in the right precinct? And that poll worker is not required to tell them. That's specific in the law. Yet, if they vote a provisional ballot and they cannot supply an ID, a photo ID, and or they don't want to give the last 4 digits of their social security number or can't remember it, that poll worker is required to tell them that their ballot will not count. And if they want to try to still have their vote count, They don't have 10 days to go ahead and vote that and bring that ID back to the Board of Elections. They literally have to get to the Board of Elections by the end of the day. And anytime you make major changes in these rules, it takes a long time for the voters to get used to it. And I haven't even started talking about early voting, because you're going to have longer lines at the polling place because boards of elections are forbidden under the bill from mailing out absentee ballot applications en masse, unsolicited. And then, as far as early in-person voting goes, they're cutting off, you absolutely cannot call for extended hours at the Board of Elections past in the evening during the weekdays, on Saturday afternoons, or on Sundays. And I understand that there's a call for uniformity, but there's a question of form over substance. And the substance is what needs to be uniform, which is the provision of the rights. And oftentimes throughout our history, if you want to look even at the Voting Rights Act, we know that to make rights equal, because people are coming from different circumstances, we have to raise the support for some groups to put them on an equal footing because of past injustices that have been done. And that's why you see such a diversity of faces here today, because they remember what it was like, their grandparents, their aunts, their uncles in the 1960s and before. And we're standing here looking at women in the ladies' gallery, and the reason you had so many women who actually ran for and were elected to the legislature in the 1920s is because they've been deprived of vote, and they stepped forward. So we can't go back. We can't go back to 2004. We can't go back further.
The other thing I should tell you, which I meant to say when I started, is it's a very strong filing. 68 counties have qualified. And that is a pretty high threshold considering the amount of time and what we filed. The only other thing I can tell you is from experience, it's not so easy to go through all these things and think they're not on the ballot. I find out every day when I'm running around on issue 3 in this state. So it's people have been able to get signatures and get them qualified at very high percentage levels in these districts.
Do you expect any directives to be coming through to try to undermine some of these things that you're trying to go after? We've already seen the absentee ballot decision that was the settlement that was reached, but do you think there's other things that will come out?
That's really difficult to speak to because the Secretary of State has been kind of an island unto himself in this process, not even dealing with his own team in many instances, so that's hard to predict. All I can say is he has the authority to come forward with those should he choose, but I'm hoping that the message that was sent out today would make him pause before taking such action.
They should have had enough. I mean, we beat them back on Senate Bill 5. We beat them back on 194. I said they should have had enough by now. We beat them back on Senate Bill 5. We beat them back on 194. I think that they would be silly to try to do something else. Just let the people's voice be heard. That's what they need.
It's our understanding, in my experience from the normal process, is the petitions will be inventoried when they're filed, so that if on their face they show, and the Secretary can verify, which will be helping them do because they're put in a good order, he can do that, that there are enough overall and enough from each county. That is enough then to stop the bill from becoming law. And then I would anticipate you'd see directives from the Secretary, which are helpful to the boards of elections to tell them how to move forward now. I know that many boards have their absentee ballots just about ready to go in anticipation that this would be a successful effort and that they would be living under the current law rather than implementing a new law.
Joe?
Congresswoman Fudge, could you discuss the political ramifications? Will conducting the 2012 election enhance the chances of President Obama, Senator Brown?
In my opinion, and I'm just giving you my opinion, absolutely. Because what has happened with 194, in my opinion, it has targeted certain predetermined populations. They are the elderly, the disabled, students, minorities, and the poor. Those are people who are more likely to vote Democratic. So absolutely, I think it would have an effect. And since Ohio is and always will be a swing state, it would only take a very small drop-off in the number of votes that are cast in this state to change the outcome of an election. And I do believe, in fact, that it will make a difference by it being on the 2012 ballot and not taking effect 2 days from now.
Congresswoman Clutch, can I just follow up on that, Joe's question? It's a weird dichotomy here. Voters seemingly keep electing Republican governors and Republican lawmakers. We saw the big tidal wave of the last election. So Democrats seemingly are put in this position of referendum, where individual issues now are taken back to the voters, which, according to polls, you may win, SB 5 and others. Explain this to me. I mean, is this a message problem on election day for candidates, Democratic candidates, or what's happening here where Republicans are winning offices, but Democrats theoretically are holding their own on issues?
Well, and I'm just going to go back to 2010 when we had a huge shift across the country in terms of Democrats losing and Republicans coming in big numbers throughout the country. Yes, we do have a message problem, no question about it. But secondly, and more importantly, when you govern and you're going through all of the things it takes to put out legislation or to make things better, it's a whole lot easier for the other side to just say no. It's a lot more difficult to explain what it is you're doing and why you're doing it. But I think that because people's awareness really has been heightened by a lot of the things going on across the country, when they see that the same people who they just put in office are the same people who don't understand that 15% of the public is poor. We have more than 46 million Americans living in poverty today. That the earned benefits that people have garnered through Social Security or Medicare are important to them. That they want to make Medicaid a block grant. That they want to cut education. I think that those same people who put those people in office will say, you know what, this isn't what I bargained for. And so now that people really are paying attention, and now they're the ones who have to get out a message. Their message has just been no, just like it was before. But now you can't say no when you're in charge. You have to put something on the table, and nothing has been put on the table. So I do think that you're going to see a shift. And yes, we have had a message problem. But now the onus is on them. Let's see what they do with it. I don't think they'll do it nearly as well as we did.